So last time we saw stability of FTCS and BTCS for parabolic PDEs, that is heat conduction equation specifically. Then we saw how for 2D heat conduction equation, that is especially explicit schemes will lead to more stringent time steps when you increase the number of dimensions for heat conduction equation. So now let us see some implicit schemes for 2D heat conduction equation. So first, this was the fully explicit FTCs, fully explicit heat conduction, fully explicit formulation for our heat conduction equation. Here we can see that both the x directional central difference and y directional central difference are at time step n. And in the fully implicit case, both x directional and y directional time central differences are at time step n plus 1. So this is a fully implicit scheme, and this is BTCS, backward in time and central in space. In this equation, if you notice, we have some 5 different unknown variables at different spatial points: ij, I plus 1j, and I minus 1j, and ij plus 1, ij minus 1. So these are the 5 unknown variables, and the only known quantity here is Tij at time step n. So we'll have this system this equation can be solved by taking all the n plus 1 variables to one side and the variable which is at nth time step to the other side. So that way we'll have to formulate a matrix and then solve the system. So in that case, when we do such a formulation, since we have 5 unknown variables, any row or column will have at most 5 non-zero elements. So in the previous case, we had for 1D case we had 3 non-zero elements in a row or column, at most 3 non-zero elements. So but since it was just in 1D, we could just arrange the unknown vector as u1 u2 up to un, all at 10 plus 1. Okay. So we were able to arrange the unknown vector in this way, and hence our matrix turned out to be a neat tridiagonal matrix. But here it will not be easily possible for us to arrange, always. So I'll write it for 2D here. So suppose we have 5 unknowns. So we may have to arrange them in some order. If everywhere we are able to arrange them in such an order, so is it possible for us to get one neat vector like this? Let's say if my I is 3 and j is 4, will I be able to get a neat vector like that? u3 comma 3, and so I'll be getting something like this, right? The next one will be u4 comma. So it's not possible for us to arrange this vector neatly, so that we won't be able to get a neat pentadiagonal matrix, but still we'll have at most 5 non-zero elements in any row or column. So any doubt here? Any doubts? Questions? Okay. So for 1D case, it's possible for us to arrange the matrix in a tridiagonal system, but for 2D, it's not always possible to write a neat pentadiagonal matrix, but still you'll have at most 5 non-zero elements in rows or columns. So then by using some kind of matrix decomposition technique, you can solve that system. So this is what you have to do for a fully implicit heat conduction, fully implicit problem, that is BTCS for two-dimensional heat conduction equation. Here what we had was in both the directions, in both x and y directions, the central difference has been evaluated at time step n plus 1. What if we evaluate the central difference at in just one of the directions at time step n plus 1 while keeping the other direction at time step n itself? That is, here I have kept x direction at time step, so I'm splitting the system into two halves. So it's like, it's the same system. It's almost a similar system, but but one of the central differences will be evaluated at a later time, whereas the other one will be evaluated at the current time step itself. So that way, when you do that, you will be able to have only, in that kind of a system, you will be having only 3 unknown variables. So suppose if we evaluate this at a later time step while keeping this central difference at time step n, then we'll have only 3 unknown variables, that is ij, I plus 1j, I minus 1j. In that, since we are evaluating this at time step n, ij plus 1 and ij minus 1 will be known variables. So we'll be taking this to the right hand side. So only the variables in this expression will be unknowns. So now you can get a tridiagonal matrix when you do this. So like in 1D. So you can get a tridiagonal matrix on one side, whereas the others, you'll be able to write this system like you know uh, like minus lambda. I'm not writing the first row, okay? I'll write from the second row. So it's possible for us to I'm not writing the last row also. So now plus you will have some non-zero terms, I mean 0 terms. So since the unknowns are only these things, so you'll have to arrange the first index alone in a neat way. So I'll just write for I'll keep 1 as j as 1, the first thing. So and it goes on till tn comma 1. So now start for the next one. This is for j equals 2 and till tn comma 2. Again start for j equals 3. So you arrange the system in this way. Now since we are fixing 1j and then doing this arrangement, this will be our unknown vector, and the known vector is going to be something like this everywhere, except for the ones corresponding to this and this. You'll have just 1 and lambda over here, or you'll have some different combinations depending on how you treat the boundary conditions. Here again you'll have some lambda minus lambda and 1. Then again for the next jth value, you again have the same repetition. This same repetition will happen in the diagonally. So this will be the kind of matrix that you'll get. It's almost tridiagonal. It's actually tridiagonal. Because this element, the one element that you're leaving out here, will be 0 only anyways. So it's actually tridiagonal. So yeah. Now you can solve this system. Here you will arrange all the elements corresponding to this plate. This is known right now, since it is at time step n. this is known, so you'll take all these elements for each of these equation. You'll take all these unknown quantities to the right side, and you'll be keeping those here. So now you can solve this system. So that way, when you have when one of the central differences is evaluated at a later time step, whereas the other one is evaluated at the current time step, then you can have a tridiagonal matrix system and you can solve it easily compared to the pentadiagonal system. And it's not actually pentadiagonal; it's a kind of matrix with at most 5 elements, 5 non-zero elements in each row or column. So now, based on this idea, we have a scheme known as alternating direction implicit, wherein we split the system into two different, that is, one time step is being split up into two different time steps. So one delta t is split up into half. So two different halves. So in the first half time step, that is in the time delta t by 2, we will be evaluating Tij at n plus half, and using this Tij at n plus half, in the next half time step, we will be evaluating Tij at n plus 1. So this is called this will be this kind of partitioning the time step will be done often in CFD. So yeah, this is we can this is some we have something like predictor, corrector and all. You would have come across those stuff, I guess. So this is not exactly that, but you split the time step into two different halves and you're doing it. This is more like operator splitting than like predictor, corrector thing. So yeah. So now in the first half, I'm the central difference is being evaluated. Central difference for x direction is being evaluated at n plus half time step, whereas the central difference in y direction is evaluated at nth time step. So we have this is one step, and in the next step, that is in the first step, x directional part is implicit, whereas y directional central difference is explicit. In the next second time step, that is second half time step, your y directional part is implicit, whereas x directional part is explicit. So you just change the directions and then go about solving the system. So now each of these steps will have a tridiagonal system. So the first step will make you solve a tridiagonal system, and then you'll find Tij at n plus half. And in the second half time step as well, you need to solve a tridiagonal system and go about finding a Tij at n plus 1. So this is what it is. In both these steps, you'll be solving a tridiagonal matrix system. So instead of solving a full system like this, a fully implicit scheme like this, you can split the system into two different time steps and make the scheme implicit in each of the directions in different time steps. So this is what is alternating direction implicit scheme is. So this is you can try attempt stability analysis for such a scheme. For each of these steps, you can attempt stability analysis. Any doubts here? Okay. So I'll move on to elliptic PDEs. So that's it for parabolic PDEs. We have seen stability for parabolic PDEs. Like since yesterday we saw stability for parabolic PDEs. Now let's move on to elliptic PDEs. So first is the Poisson's equation. Here we have a second order differential operator in both x and y, and this is a non-homogeneous equation wherein f of x comma y is non-zero. So this is a Poisson's equation. If f of x comma y is 0, then we get the Laplace equation. So I'm doing central differencing for each of these differential operators. So both of them are second order accurate. Both the central differencing are second order accurate in delta x and delta y. So this is the approximation of our Laplace equation. So now here let's take beta as delta x by delta y. Then we get an expression something like this. This expression gets modified as such an expression. Now we need to evaluate Ti comma j. So I'm just taking Tij, I'm just writing everything else in terms of just Tij. So this expression gets modified into something like this. So now I have not used any superscripts here because we don't have any time variation. So I have not used any superscripts here, only subscripts are used. But here from now on I'll be using a superscript just to identify the iteration level and not the time step. That doesn't mean the time step. So I'll be using k instead of n. So it's like using what is there in the right hand side, we'll be evaluating Tij on the left hand side. So first let's just, so this is something that you evaluate in the previous iteration, and whereas this is something you evaluate in the current iteration. So I've put k, iteration level k for all the terms on the right hand side, whereas I've put k plus 1 for the term on the left hand side, which is Tij. So this is known as the Gauss-Jacobi iteration. So yeah, can we make an improvement over this iteration? Because here to find the value of the variable at the point Ti at the point I comma j, we use the value of the same variable at 4 different points. These 4 points actually. So these 4 points are used in finding the value of the variable at the point ij. And now we are going to do this at all points. So we can either suppose if we go in this direction. Suppose if we first find the value of Tij at this point and then at this point and so on. When we go in this such a direction, when we are evaluating the value of Tij at this point, we have already evaluated the value of T at this point. So because we are going in this direction, we are evaluating first we are evaluating the value of t at this point, then at this point, and then at this point, and we go on towards right. So this value is known at time step k at the iteration level k plus 1. At but still we are going to use the value of t at this point at the iteration level k. This suppose if this is I comma j, this is going to be I minus 1 comma j. So Ti minus 1 comma j is used at k in Gauss-Jacobi iteration. But this value of I plus 1 comma j is not known at k plus 1th iteration, but it's only known at kth iteration level. Similarly, value of this point I plus I comma j plus 1 is not known. Suppose if we had a point here, then it's I comma j minus 1. Suppose if we are first moving in this direction, we are finding the value at all the points in this level, and then go on to find the value of t at the points at the next y level. First we are doing it at this level and next at this level and so on. If we go on doing that, then we'll be knowing the value of t at this point and at this point at k plus 1th iteration level. Whereas the value of t at this point and this point will not be known at k plus 1th iteration level. They will be known only at kth iteration level. So in that case, to evaluate t at this point I comma j, it will be required for us to use all these points. So since some of the points are known at k plus 1th iteration level and some others are known at kth iteration level, can we go about just modifying these terms alone? That is, instead of using this at k plus 1th, kth iteration level, can we just write k plus 1th iteration? I mean, evaluate them at k plus 1th iteration level. These two quantities alone at k plus 1, whereas the other two which are not known at k plus 1 are just, we'll just evaluate them at kth iteration level. So that kind of a method is known as Gauss-Seidel iteration. So whatever you know from the previous, whatever you know now at the current iteration level, you use them at the current iteration level. Whatever you don't know, you use them at the previous iteration level. So that kind of scheme is known as Gauss-Seidel iteration. So it's not just this. It will not always be just these two terms that will be at k plus 1th iteration level. It depends on the direction that you are moving. Suppose instead of going towards right, if I had gone towards left, then I minus 1 comma j will not be known at k plus 1. It will be known only at kth iteration level. And I plus 1 comma j will be known at k plus 1th iteration level. So that way, depending on the direction that you're moving, some of these quantities, some of these 4 terms will be known at k plus 1th iteration level, and some others won't be known at k plus 1th iteration level. So depending on that, you can use them accordingly here. So that kind of a scheme is known as Gauss-Seidel iteration. So any doubts here? I mean, you guys would have come across these things already, is it? Have you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So yeah, this is Gauss-Jacobi and Gauss-Seidel iteration. So elliptic PDEs will usually be solving using these things. Next, let's move on to hyperbolic PDEs. So here, coming back to our linear convection equation, so we have dou u by dou t plus a dou u by dou x equals 0. So I'm doing FTCS. It's an explicit scheme for this linear convection equation. So this is forward in time and central in space. Both are of order delta, both are first order accurate. And I think in the first class we saw stability for this, but not, we have done stability for this thing. Remember? Okay. So, yeah. So this is unconditionally unstable. That is, it's always unstable. So what stability analysis gives is, I'm not going through the full stability analysis of this. I think we have gone through this sometime back in the first class in a hazy way. So yeah, the same thing. This is what is the result. So the requirement for stability analysis is this one, but this quantity is always going to be positive, but your stability analysis requires this to be negative all the time. So anyway, you cannot put any condition here to make this quantity negative, because this is always positive. So this is what you cannot put any condition on it to make it stable, so it's unconditionally unstable. So that's what it is. So I've just rewritten it over here. So stability analysis gives us something like this, but actually this quantity is greater than or equal to 0. So FTCS scheme is unconditionally unstable. It's always unstable. So you cannot use FTCS scheme to solve a linear convection equation. You have to go about doing some other thing. So we have something known as upwind methods. Instead of central schemes, we'll be doing some forward in time thing for the differential operator, but for the space, for the differential operator in time, for the differential operator in space, we'll be doing forward in space or backward in space instead of central in space. So how do you decide whether to do forward or backward in space is based on physics. So in this equation, use the conserved variable. I mean, this is a conservation law. Linear convection equation is it's a conservation law. We have dou u by dou t plus dou by dou x of au equals 0. Here use the conserved variable, and flux of the conserved variable is au. So dou f by dou u equals a is the wave speed. So we have drawn characteristics initially. Like we saw how to plot the characteristics, and we saw traveling wave solutions for this linear convection equation. So basically, if a is greater than 0, then in the xt plane, your characteristics will be slanted towards positive x direction. And if a is less than 0, your characteristics in the xt plane will be slanted in the negative x direction. So it's like, and we have made enough arguments about how the solution at the initial point will be the same along the characteristics. Along this characteristic, if you consider any point x comma t, then the solution at this point is going to be the same as the value of u at the initial time t. It is u of x minus at comma 0. So here the x coordinate is x minus at, and t coordinate is 0. So u of x comma t is equal to u of x minus at comma 0. So this is something that we have seen earlier when we were doing PDEs. So along the characteristics, your solution will remain constant, and the point to note here is if your wave speed is positive, then your characteristics are slanted in the positive x direction, and when your wave speed is negative, they are slanted in the negative x direction. So and also because the solution just is the same along the characteristic, and we have infinite number of characteristics just in this location. It's not just one characteristic over here. We have infinite number of characteristic with the same slope. So if you have some kind of initial condition, that will just travel towards right for a greater than 0, and the solution will just travel towards left for a less than 0. That is your initial profile. If you have some initial profile u for t equals 0, that profile over time will move in either positive or negative direction depending on your sign of a. That is the wave speed. So now we have something known as upwind and downwind. So let's just consider this stencil I minus 1 and I plus 1. So suppose if our a is positive, a is greater than 0, then the solution will move towards right. So it's actually the characteristics are slanted towards positive x direction, and the solution hence is moving towards right. So it's like so now to find ui, that is, if you had in the previous time step, if you had some profile over here, some value of u over here, that will some sort of move towards right because the wave speed is positive. So now to find ui, we use ui minus 1 and not ui plus 1, because from ui only things will go to ui plus 1 in the next time step. There is nothing coming in this direction since the wave speed is positive. So things are going towards right only. So now to evaluate your value at ith point, you only use the value of u at I minus 1 point and not anything on the right. So you only use things from the left because your solution is moving towards right. So at the previous time, if you want to evaluate something at this time step, you use the values from the previous time step, right? So that is going to come from left and not right. So to find anything at this point, you use the values at the previous points. So for first order accuracy, I just require 1 point, that is ui minus 1. Suppose if I need higher order accuracy, I'll consider I minus 2, I minus 3 also. So we can do that as well. So this is the upwind point, and this is the to a wave. That is, if we have a wave moving towards right, and this is the upwind of the wave, and it's like going up the wind. Okay, and this side is the downwind direction. So now you can construct some scheme for the linear convection equation. So you basically are doing a forward difference in time and backward in space, because you want to only consider the point I minus 1 and not anything to the right. So in that case, you go about doing backward difference in space. So if A is greater than 0, that you go about doing FTBS, forward in time, backward in space. Suppose if A is less than 0, then the upwind direction is this. So things are A is less than 0. So things are moving towards left over time. So if you want to evaluate something at ith point now, at this time step, you want to look at the value of u at I plus 1 point in the previous time step. So you go about using I plus 1 here. So now you do forward in space instead of backward in space like the earlier case. So when A is negative, you do back forward in space. So now you get an FTFS scheme, forward in time and forward in space. So this is an upwind method. So this is a basic introduction of upwind method. So I've shown it only for linear convection equation. So instead of just this kind of equation, you consider some general equation of. So here u is the conserved variable and f of u is the flux vector. So now here again you can do dou f by dou u. This also can be a function of u. So here a was just a constant. Instead of that, this quantity can also be a function of u. So here again you'll only look at, I'll just write it as a of u. So here again you look at the positive and negative, the sign of this quantity a of u at different points. So in this case, in the domain, in some regions of the domain, this will be positive, and in some regions this will be negative, depending on the value of u, since it's a function. Here, since a is a constant, in whole of the domain, a will either be positive or be negative. So you will either be doing FTBS or be doing FTFS, depending on the sign of u. But here, since a is a function of u, in some regions of the domain you will have positive sign, and in some other regions you will have negative sign. So in some regions you will have to do FTFS, and in some other regions you will have to do FTBS. So depending on the sign. So this is it. So for this is how you do it for a general problem. So this is an upwind scheme. So now let me so as of now we have seen only explicit schemes. So we saw FTCS, it's an explicit scheme, and we have seen some upwind methods. We have seen one first order upwind method, wherein we use FTBS if A is greater than 0, and we use FTFS if A is less than 0. All of these are explicit schemes. So this is an explicit first order upwind method actually. So now let us look at some implicit schemes wherein there will be many variables, many unknowns that are at time step n plus 1. So here let's see BTCS, like a variation of FTCS. So here this is BTCS, and all the variables here are at time step n plus 1. So this is our backward in time and central in space scheme. This is a fully implicit scheme, and this is stable, unlike FTCS. So this is a stable scheme. Now, like in parabolic PDEs, we have Crank-Nicolson scheme here as well. So it's the same, half times explicit and implicit and half times explicit. The same equation, uh, but we just split it into half and half. Split the explicit and implicit things into half and half. So instead, if we have just beta and 1 minus beta here, it will be some general thing. Okay. This is something that we saw yesterday for parabolic PDEs actually. So next is a first order implicit upwind method. So these are some central schemes. So now this is an upwind scheme. Here again, instead of evaluating this central these central in space quantities at time step n, we evaluate them at time step n plus 1. So that way they become implicit upwind methods. So if A is greater than 0, we have FTBS, and if A is less than 0, sorry, not FTBS, BTBS, it's actually backward in time and backward in space, and this is backward in time and forward in space. So these are some implicit upwind schemes. So now let's move on. Now that we have seen some schemes related to hyperbolic PDEs, let's move on to stability of hyperbolic PDEs. So initially in the first class, we only saw the stability for FTCS scheme corresponding to linear convection equation. Now let us see it for FTBS like this also corresponds to linear convection equation, and we have A, specifically A to be greater than 0, because we formulated FTBS only for A greater than 0, right? And if A is less than 0, we'll have to go for FTFS. So now with this as some like some constraint, let's move on to do the stability analysis. So this is our numerical solution, and this is the solution that will be stored in the computer, and this is the error term. So when we substitute this, and when we'll be able to separate that equation into an equation containing just u and just e, and this is that equation that contains only e. I mean, this equation and this equation are exactly the same except for the variable. So now we have an evolution equation for error. So now let's go about doing the Fourier transform. So we just write Ej at n as integral of ek cap at n into exponential of ikxj. So here we are moving from xj to k through Fourier transform. So now let me just replace all of these quantities by this Fourier transform, and then we can just take this, that is we can, since the variable of integration is just dk, so we'll be able to just take all the terms together and make this to be 0. We have seen this argument yesterday. So we are getting such an expression in terms of ek cap at different time steps n and n plus 1. So now let's just divide this equation by ek cap at n to get the amplitude ratio. So we have something like this. So we have a real part and an imaginary part. Unlike the parabolic PDE's case, here in hyperbolic PDEs, we'll often end up getting complex quantities for this amplitude ratio. So we have a real part and an imaginary part, and then for stability we require the modulus of this amplitude ratio to be less than or equal to 1. So we require the modulus of this quantity to be less than or equal to 1. So this is going to be square root of sum of the squares of real and imaginary parts separately. that must be less than or equal to 1. So now when we do such, when we expand this term out, we'll get something like this. And since I'm also squaring over here, so since this is a positive quantity and this is a positive quantity, it's okay to square without any change in sign and all. So I'm just squaring over here. So, and also I'm expanding this term. So now this is less than or equal to 1. So these two combined together, it will give us just nu squared. So we have one more nu squared here, that has become 2 nu squared, and I've rewritten everything. All of these quantities are just written as such over here. So now just combining these two and these two terms. I have this and this, two separate terms, and now cos k delta x minus 1 can be rewritten as minus 2 sine squared k delta x by 2. Similarly, this as this one. So now we have got something like this. This is something similar to what we did yesterday, but yeah, we have just additional terms coming up, two different terms. Yesterday we had just one term like this. Now we have two terms in the same way. So 1 and 1 will get cancelled and we have some expression like this. So now if you look at this expression, sine squared k delta x by 2 is always positive. And nu is a delta t by delta x, and we considered a to be just greater than 0 for this problem. So a is always greater than 0 here. And delta t and delta x are also greater than 0. So nu is greater than or equal to 0, and 4 is also positive. So this whole thing is always positive. So in order for this whole term to be less than, that is this whole term to be less than or equal to 0, we require this nu minus 1 to be less than or equal to 0. So nu less than or equal to 1 is the stability criterion. So we have nu is a delta t by delta x, right? So we have a delta t by delta x less than or equal to 1. So this is our stability condition. So this is the CFL condition, Courant, Friedrich and Lewis condition. So they have given this condition, and in CFD we have this terminology that this term is always known as this Courant number, a delta t by delta x. So yeah, even if you do some simulations and go for presentations, people will ask you what Courant number you have used. So yeah, they always ask about people because depending on the value of Courant number you use, you'll have your stability will vary. So it's always required that it should be less than or equal to 1. But when you this is the stability criterion that you are getting. But if you choose it to be very much less than 1, you will have low diffusion. Sorry, if your Courant number is too much less than 1, very far away from 1, that is if it's close to 0.10 and all, then it will be your scheme will have more diffusion. So people usually choose it to be higher, but it should not cross this boundary. That is, it should not cross 1. But people will always want their scheme to be low diffusive, right? Low diffusion, a scheme that is low diffusive is actually a good scheme. So people will want their Courant number. They'll fix Courant number to be something close to 0.9, 0.8, like that. They'll if we cross 1, if we go very near to 1, or if we cross 1, then stability will be affected. And we won't be getting any solution at all if we cross this border. The solution will be nowhere close to our original solution. But however, when you choose it to be very much less than 1, the solution will be stable. You will be getting some solution, but it will be very high, it will have very high diffusion. So you always choose it near this border. Is you always go near 0.9 or 0.8 to have good solution, that is with low diffusion. So in both the cases you will be getting some solution that is stable. But in the first case, your solution will have high diffusion. In the next case, it will have low diffusion. So people prefer this one. Yeah. So this is one argument that I wanted to make. Yes. So any doubts here?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So yeah, I think that's it for today. You can ask questions or for the rest of the time.
Ma'am, how do they actually like go with the low diffusion? Like how do they get the low diffusion term while working on your CFD analysis? Like, is
Okay.
it something you give initially, or it depends on your?
Okay. So it's like so when you have some differential equation, you convert it into a difference equation, right? For this, you can further do modified PD or equivalent PD analysis. So that way, when you do that, you're going back actually, but this term will not be zero. You will be getting something like this equals some term like delta t or delta x, first order term or second order term. You will have something over here. So now this term will determine your diffusion. So basically this term is what that determines your diffusion. And if you have so if this is dou squared du by, if this is something like this second order derivative, then this term will determine diffusion. And if you have some, you will be having some quantities, some constants also coming up. This combinations of A and many things will come up here. So you will have some coefficients also. So here again you'll have some coefficients, and dou cube u by dou x cube term will be coming up. This will determine dispersion, that is oscillations. So diffusion and dispersion are two different quantities. So diffusion is like when you have some sharp corners, your scheme will not actually capture this sharp corners. They'll tend to move like this. So this is what your scheme will give, this dotted line solution. So this difference is what is known as diffusion, or this is actually error. So this is highly determined by this term. And yeah, if you are, I told you, right, that there will be some coefficients here. So those coefficients will help you control the diffusion. So if you adjust the coefficients to be very close to zero, then you can control your diffusion. Similarly, the same with dispersion. Dispersion is something that will lead you to oscillations. So if you have some solution like this, so this solid line is the actual solution. So your this one is okay. I mean, this red one is the numerical solution. It will lead to oscillations near this shock. So these oscillations are bounded by are governed by this dispersion term. It is the odd order derivative term. So odd order derivatives will contribute to dispersion, and even order derivatives will contribute to diffusion. So highest, if you're in your scheme, if the highest order term is second order, that is if it's even order, then you will have more diffusion than dispersion. And if your highest order term is odd order, then you'll have more dispersion than diffusion. So this is one thing, and you can control your diffusion by using these coefficients that will appear over here. that is in front of these even order derivatives, you'll have some coefficients appearing. So those if you can somehow control those coefficients, then you can reduce your diffusion. So or else you can introduce some parameters in your scheme such that those parameters will appear here as coefficients, and then you can have a control. If naturally your scheme is not leading to any coefficients, that will help you control, because if it's just a or something, then that is there in the governing equation, you cannot have any control over there. But if you need some control, you can introduce some quantity called lambda or something. So here you can make some quantity appear here in this region as coefficient through your scheme. So here in your scheme, you have to somehow introduce lambda. So then you will be able to control your diffusion. So you can see that if you do this modified PDE analysis, like how to control your diffusion comes by looking at your these terms in the modified PDE. That is, these terms in the modified PDE will help you control, will help you have a grip over diffusion actually. So is that okay? Okay. So you know, right, how to do modified PDE, this equivalent PDE analysis. So you are going to actually substitute, expand each of these by Taylor series and expand. I mean, you have to expand each of these terms by Taylor series expansion. Then you have to arrange them, and you'll be getting some additional terms also. So for yeah, is that okay? I mean, are you clear about how to do this modified PDE or equivalent PDE approach?
Okay.
Okay. So, any other questions? Any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, next class we'll see about how to control. We have something known as artificial viscosity. So, this term is actually artificial, will contribute to, I mean, the coefficients of this term will be the artificial viscosity coefficients. In any, I mean, if we have any equation, if we have some convection, I mean, the governing equations, if you look at the Navier-Stokes equations, then the first order terms, we have some convective terms over here, and the second order terms are the diffusion terms. So the coefficients of those are viscous coefficients. So in CFD, like we have some terminology known as artificial viscosity. That is, your governing equation doesn't have any viscosity, but your numerical scheme will introduce some viscosity, because you know our numerical scheme is not exact, it's only approximate. So we have some error, and these are the error terms, those on the right hand side over here. So now here we have second order derivatives here. So this is like artificial viscosity. Like, unlike the physical viscosity, we are adding viscosity to the solution by doing this approximation. I mean, through our finite difference scheme, we are adding some viscosity to the solution. So this is known as artificial viscosity, and this is the artificial viscosity coefficient. So this coefficient only will help you in controlling the diffusion actually. So we'll see that in the next class. Okay. So we'll meet sometime next week. Yeah. We'll stop here. So do you have any questions?
No.
No,
Okay,
ma'am.
fine. Then we'll stop here and continue next week. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.